delighted today to be joined by Kelly Finley, who is dual qualified in both US and Scots law, and has worked extensively both in Scotland and the United States. Very experienced attorney, has a really fascinating insight into the current state of US-Scottish relations. So we're going to be covering a little bit of that ground today. And without any further ado, Kelly, over to you, if you'd like to say a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I was born and raised in Southern California. I graduated San Diego State University with a BA in political science. I went on to law school at the University of Richmond, Virginia, where I received my Juris Doctorate in law. I became a member of the bar of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I then later became a member of the bar for the state of California. I'm also a member of the bar for the United States Federal District Court, Eastern District of California. I later went on to the University of Dundee in Scotland and received my LLM in corporate and commercial law and became a qualified solicitor in Scotland. So I've been practicing law now since, oh goodness, about 15 years. It's been about 15 years. And I love the practice of law. I really enjoy it. It's never a boring day. I'm now doing family law mostly. And that is especially not boring. So
it can't be many people that are qualified both in Scots law and in US law.
No. As a matter of fact, when I first became qualified, I realized that there was definitely a gap there. There's not a lot of Americans going to Scotland to become Scots solicitors. I believe it is more the other way around. But there definitely are not a lot of us.
So what were some of the big differences that you noticed in the practice of law between Scotland and the various US jurisdictions in which you worked?
Yeah, well, the big giant one is, of course, in the United States, you're an attorney, and an attorney is to oversimplify it, is a solicitor, and in Scotland, an advocate, all rolled into one. When we get admitted to the bar, I can argue cases on appeal in front of the California State Supreme Court or the Virginia Supreme Court. There's no bar to me to do that. A solicitor, of course, cannot argue a case in front of the High Court. That would be left to an advocate, or in England, a barrister. So that's obviously a major difference. Again, we have no restrictions on what we can do in those terms.
And in terms of legal culture, was there anything that
the United States pays a whole lot more money. They pay a whole lot more money. The bar is very active. It very well, obviously, only being a solicitor, I'm not sure what it's like for an advocate in Scotland or a barrister in England, but the bars are very active. We have a lot of continuing legal education, which I know in Scotland they do as well. A lot of cocktail mixers, I'm sure in Scotland they do as well. But we have more people. That alone gives more opportunity to practice law and to make a living doing it.
So in your time in Scotland, obviously, that's where we first came to know you, and you were involved with sovereignty, and we're absolutely delighted to have you on board, and I know that you are supportive of Scottish independence. But I want to, before we come to that, I wonder if you can give your appraisal of the current state of US-Scottish relations. I know a number of things have been said by prominent Scottish politicians about figures within the Trump administration or Trump administration policies. How do you analyze the current state of US-Scottish relations?
Well, it's confusing. I think that's the beginning word. First Minister Swinney originally said, I believe it was about a month ago, that he wanted to pivot closer relations with the United States, and an independent Scotland would pivot that way. It's my understanding, and I could be wrong, that he received a lot of backlash about that, and then did a U-turn, and then started speaking about closer relations with the EU. So what is going on in the First Minister's head and his advisors, I have no idea. Obviously, as an American and an American of Scottish descent, I would love to see closer relations with the United States. I understand that the S&P, who's currently in control, have some issues with the Trump administration. Particularly, I know tariffs are hitting. It's my understanding, and I might be wrong though, that U.S. and UK are working out a deal, or have worked out a deal that's favorable to the UK as a whole. Obviously, Scotland should be negotiating their own deals, and that would be my position. And I believe that is the Scottish government's position right now. They absolutely should be. They should be talking with people in the United States and different ways in which trade relations can be improved between Scotland and the United States and various other countries, as a matter of fact. I'd like to see that. There's a lot of money to be made for countries like Scotland or any other country that have products to sell, right? So Scotland has oil. It is Scotland's oil. It's not England's oil. It's not the UK oil. Scotland makes I hear they make a darn good whiskey, and that's very popular here. That does very well. And I'm sure there's that market, that slice of the pie of the market, the American market, can be made much larger. I don't believe it's finite. There's the opportunities are ample here. Obviously there's cultural similarities, there could be academic exchanges that would benefit both countries tremendously. University of Edinburgh, University of Aberdeen, Glasgow, St. Andrews, those are all world-class universities that could easily take on board American students from Stanford and Harvard and Yale and Brown, and it'd be an honor to go to those universities and have the exchange go back and forth, because you're not just getting an academic exchange, you're getting intellectual exchange. And Scotland needs to maintain its intellectual capital, and if you could entice some of those students from abroad, whether they're from the United States or other places, but especially from the United States, to stay, that would only add to Scotland as a whole. Why would you not want that? You would want that. I mean, University of Edinburgh was once the premier medical school in the whole world. That's where you wanted to go. American doctors went there to train. I believe it was in the 1800s. That was the place to go. I don't see why that can't be that way again, and it should.
And there's so many. The number of Scottish Americans is mind-blowing. It may very well be more than there are Scots in Scotland. There are a lot of Americans I know from my time over in the States that still really treasure those cultural ties. But of course, the most prominent Scottish American globally at the moment is Donald Trump. So how would you assess his attitude currently to Scotland, and what do you think prominent Scots could do to maybe build on those ties?
Well, it's my understanding he has actually pumped some cash into the Scottish economic system. He owns a couple golf courses, I believe, not just in Scotland, but in Ireland as well. But he obviously has a very soft spot for Scotland. I know he does. He wrote a letter to Alex Salmond, oh gosh, it's been about 25 years ago, in which he criticizes Salmond and calls him crazy Alex Salmond over some of his policies. I don't believe it was over Scottish independence. It was over some of his policies, and actually pointed out that Salmond maybe was going to ruin his mother's beloved Scotland. But obviously he has a soft spot for Scotland, and I definitely see a situation where he would pump more cash into it. For him, it's a second home. It's obvious. It has to be. It's his mother's home. If you notice, when he gives his broadcast from the White House, the Oval Office, right over his shoulder is a picture of his mother. And wow. There's no way that's on purpose. Absolutely on purpose.
Yeah.
And as far as reaching out to him, obviously, he's a businessman too. So he's going to be looking for deals, just like businessmen in Scotland are looking for deals. There's no reason why both sides can't win. And that's what should be kept in mind.
Of course, the reality, I think, of our political class, shall we say, in Hollywood is probably also not lost on you. And I think a solid majority of Scots still are stunned, shocked at the way that woke has caught on in Scotland, and it seems to be an elite preoccupation. Did you find there was a significant difference coming to Scotland
Oh yeah.
with some of the woke
Oh yeah.
stuff, or was it just like
yeah.
being in
No,
UCLA
no,
or something?
no, it's not. I mean, California gets painted badly. It does. And other Americans refer to it as a place of fruits and nuts. So see that they're a little off. That's at Los Angeles. That's San Francisco. That's what they're mostly talking about. I live in the Central Valley of California. This is agriculture land. This is farmers and ranchers. This is heavily conservative. It's heavily Hispanic community. It's more than 50% Hispanic, as a matter of fact, and they are very culturally conservative. These are, they tend to they're not voting for the woke. That's for sure. And as a matter of fact, a lot of Democrats in my family were originally all Democrats. But it's precisely the woke types of stuff that chase them away.
Do you see California turning red at some point in the future?
Yes. Yeah. San Francisco and Los Angeles are so heavily populated. So that's what shifts the balance right now. But the tide is turning here. The tide is turning. People are upset, really upset. I mean, Trump, for example, Trump recently announced to schools that are receiving federal funds, you're not going to receive those federal funds if you allow boys, transgender girls, so boys, into girls' locker rooms. Well, that's been celebrated. That's been celebrated in communities that you wouldn't expect. In California, you won't hear anyone say anything bad about that here. So it is really on retreat here. I was shocked at the level of support in Scotland. I really was, because you're making policy on statistical outliers. Not that they don't deserve a say, they do, but you're infringing on everybody else's personal rights is on top of that. So which one is it going to be? Right? There's a way to handle people who have special needs, special requirements, but making everybody kowtow to those on the side, the ones that are the minority, if you will, is not correct.
Yeah. Why do you think woke has caught on in Western Europe to quite the extent that it has?
I'm not entirely sure. I have theories that I don't feel comfortable sharing. I see it as the stepchild of postmodernism. And you can break everything down to its basest parts instead of looking at the individual as a whole person holistically. I'm not a foot or an arm. I'm not just a female. I'm not just a mom. I'm not just an attorney. I'm Kelly, and all that comes with that, as a whole person. And that's how people should be treated. I like what Martin Luther King said. You're not to judge a person on the basis of his color, but on his character. That's what it should be. And that's what we all should strive for, I think.
And we really are mistaken, I think, in referring to it as a form of liberalism or ultra-liberalism, because a lot of what we've seen with wokeism is that it has come with a really strong authoritarian streak. I think definitely. I definitely see that around speech, and so it was really gratifying to hear J.D. Vance lay into European European political elite on their attitude to speech, and saying that countries historically that had placed a really high value on freedom of speech seem to be going backwards and fairly majorly. So what do you think J.D. Vance is trying to achieve with this? Is he? Do you think it seems to be a kind of a principled thing for him, a conviction thing? But what's your take on that approach? It's really, Europeans are not used to this. They are used to going elsewhere in the world and lecturing people on human rights, values, and so on. other
Yeah.
people are not supposed to be coming to Europe and lecturing Europeans. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
said
I'll
it's a
start.
fair question.
I'll start here because I was in the UK. There was a woman and she was in England and she was standing outside across the street outside of an abortion clinic. Okay. Wasn't saying a word, wasn't holding a sign. She was just standing there with her head down. And the police, I saw on a video, a police approached her, asked her what she was doing, want to know if and she told them she was praying silently to herself and she was arrested. Okay. That, I almost said the words that'll never happen in the United States because a knock on wood, that is a violation. That would, if they were to arrest her here, that's a violation of the First Amendment. It doesn't mean some stupid cop wouldn't try it or some woke city might get mad and want that to happen. That could happen, but it is 100% a violation of the First Amendment. It's not even close. We here in these states, we have, and different states do it differently, but we have buffer zones. So you cannot protest or block the entrance to any abortion clinic or anything like that. So you can't stand there. But the buffer zone is very limited, and standing across the street on a public sidewalk, not blocking anyone's access or anything, not carrying a sign, which in the states you'd be allowed to do, not saying anything, which in the states you'd be allowed to do to a certain degree, depending on what state you're in. 100% within the framework of the First Amendment. A cop that would arrest that woman would be in deep trouble. And I say this as I started off my career originally as an first interning in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office in Virginia, the prosecutor's office. So I had a situation where a cop, and he meant well, he searched someone's bag that he shouldn't have searched. And someone had set down a bag and walked away about 3 feet to use a restroom and was right back within 30 seconds. And he'd already searched the bag. And I told him, dude, this isn't Nazi Germany. You can't just search it. He didn't find anything that was, well, I take that back. He found drug paraphernalia. It was a $50 fine, but he shouldn't have done that. So I have a little bit of experience in that area. It would be under the Fourth Amendment, not a proper search. So to give you just a quick example. So I would think that a cop that would do that here, when the prosecutors looked at it, they'd go, dude, what are you thinking? That's within the First Amendment. She's outside the buffer zone. She's not harassing anybody. She's not stopping anyone's ingress or egress. You messed up. And now the city may be sued. But our laws are different here. That would be in the states.
And do you think there is still a consensus across most of the left and most of the right in the states that the First Amendment has served the US well?
Most definitely.
That cultural consensus still holds.
Yes.
It would be interesting for us to see what happens with Scottish independence, whether we go down the line of a written constitution, an unwritten constitution. My great fear is that we end up with the world's first woke constitution, and I think that's part of what sovereignty is here for, is to make sure that absolutely categorically does not happen. Because I think there are people that would love to see that. They would love to see the 72 genders enshrined in the Constitution of an independent Scotland. But
that's right. Well, the United States Constitutional Convention, it wasn't the fear that there was going to be a woke constitution, but as Thomas Jefferson said as he sat in Paris, he said, "I smell a rat." They were afraid of what was going to come out of this written constitution, and that's a real fear. What are you going to put into that? And the original draft did not have the Bill of Rights. It did not have the First Amendment or the Second or Third or Fourth, up to the 10th Amendment. It didn't have that, and so it was rejected. As a matter of fact, I believe it was Thomas Jefferson and a couple of his colleagues who said that the first draft of the U.S. Constitution, was they could think of no better instrument to create an aristocracy than that draft. So that was their fear. But I hear you what you're saying. I think a woke written constitution would be horrible.
So we've spoken a little bit about the first. Why not do the second as well?
Okay.
I think it's something. I don't remember the numbers, but I was pleasantly surprised at the number of firearms licenses that are actually held in Scotland. It's just maybe there's not quite the same culture around firearms as there is in the States. I think one thing that does seem to be changing in a European context is this massive wave of migrant crime and this fear that we're seeing currently growing in the inner cities, that, you know, you could be randomly stabbed, attacked, whatever. So in a US context, you know, you've obviously had similar issues with the gangs, some of them, you know, coming up from Latin America and so on, and often very violent individuals. Has that maybe changed attitudes towards the Second Amendment in the States, or how
It's enforced. It's
it's enforced it,
The
right?
Second Amendment isn't going
Yeah.
anywhere. I know once in a while
Mm.
someone floats that balloon. It's not going to happen. There are approximately, I think, and I might be wrong, a little bit off on this number, 350 million Americans. The lowball conservative estimate for guns is 600 million. That's just the guns. That's not the spare parts. And spare part, it's very, very, very easy to build your own.
And how many Democratic Congress people do you think own a firearm?
Most.
Yeah.
Absolutely most. I promise you, it's absolutely most. California, California, New York, all the Massachusetts, every liberal state you can think of, most of them do. I own person. As a matter of fact, Harris herself said she owned a gun.
A Glock, I believe it was. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's what she said. She has a Glock. She probably has more than that, actually.
Yeah.
So that it's not going anywhere. As a matter of fact, even if somebody came along and really wanted to take away the Second Amendment and outlaw guns, it's not feasible. There's too many. You would never even begin to get them.
And what for you is the strongest argument in favor of mass gun ownership? Because obviously safety is raised as a concern, but do you think it's more protection against crime and violent individuals, or do you see it more as a sort of buttress against tyranny?
Well, it was originally conceived as a buttress against tyranny. I mean, and of course, originally people had their guns not just for that, but my family always lived on the frontier. So that's food. And when you're on the frontier, you're usually out there all by yourself. Your nearest neighbor might be a mile away. And there are bad people out there trying to prey on others. There has always been. This is, you know, from time immemorial, this is what happens. And you have to be prepared to defend yourself because there's nobody coming to help you. And that's just reality. And that culture has remained for all those reasons.
Yeah. Interesting. So we've had a wee look at kind of where Scotland is, maybe one or two of the areas where, you know, we've gone a wee bit off the rails. Tell me, give yourself like bigger picture take on Scotland and Scottish culture. And presumably you enjoyed working over here, or
I loved it. It's absolutely beautiful.
What for you were the highlights, and what do you miss most?
From the States? Milkshakes and cheeseburger. I miss from Scotland. Oh gosh, fish and chips. There was some great fish and chips. We don't have that here at the same level. I miss the people. They're friendly. They're outgoing. I say highly, highly, highly intelligent. To the point where I don't understand why independence has become difficult, because and the independence is just in reach. You have to just take it. Scotland has so much to offer the world, from academia, financial. Edinburgh was a financial center for so long. Of course, the people themselves are, no matter where they go in the world, they're successful. And so if we could just get them to stay home in Scotland and be as successful and independent, that would be tremendous.
And across the States at the moment, how much support do you reckon there is for Scottish independence? Particularly amongst Scottish Americans, or those that culturally maybe are invested.
Well, I'm saying this as someone whose family came to America about 300 years ago. Both my mom and dad's family are mostly from Scotland. my family came direct from Scotland to Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas. And some of them also came via Ulster, but originally from Scotland. So I grew up hearing that we were Scottish. It was very important that we knew that we were Scottish. And my dad, as a kid, I remember my dad very closely following in the 1970s, the Scottish independence movement, the SNP, and the slogan, "It's Scotland's oil." And that has forever stuck with me. Well, why wouldn't it be Scotland's oil? You know, it's sitting in Scotland. It seems obvious. I think that from my cultural background and people of that cultural background, I think the support for independence movement is extremely high, because you have to remember, when our families left, Scotland was still Scotland. It wasn't part of the United Kingdom. And so as it's passed down through the generations, that's how it's been remembered. I was never told I was British or of any kind. I was told I was Scottish. Additionally, as I was discussing earlier with you, when my family has always lived on the frontier, we were absolutely here for the American War for Independence. And I, of course, asked the family when I was a kid, why did we support the American cause and not the British cause? And my dad turned to me and said, because it was payback time. And I think that resonates with people of my background, because their families would have been here at that time. And the Scots who had been here for a while, and the Scots-Irish, if you will, as we call them here, were heavily, Scots-Irish made up the bulk of the American forces.
Yeah. Well, we certainly hope that we'll see independence in our lifetime. I don't want to wait till I'm an old man to see it. I would like to see it on the sooner side. Some really exciting things happening over here in Scotland at the moment, with Sovereignty's hookup with Liberate Scotland, and we are seeing a real uptick in momentum. So I know you were when you were over here in Scotland, when you were living here, you were very supportive of Sovereignty, and so we were always very grateful for your input and your perspective. We would love to say thank you to you once again for that. But maybe just maybe one final message: if there are any Americans, maybe younger Americans, that are considering the possibility perhaps of returning to Scotland if they have those ancestral ties, what would your advice to them be?
Oh, goodness. Enjoy it. Stay as long as you can. Learn everything you can about the culture. I mean, I was there for 3 years. There's so much more I can still learn. If you're there over for academic reasons, again, stay as long as you can. Try to work there. Get to know the people. You won't regret it. You guys are the best people in the world. You made me feel at home immediately, and there's not a day that goes by that I don't miss it.
Well, I feel pretty similar about the States. So I will be so really, as I say, appreciate your time today. And I don't know if there's any links to anything you want folk to follow with you and your practice, or anything you want to plug. But if you have those, we'll include them in the description below. Kelly Finley, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.